question I came up with is, to what extent would the usage of video games impact a child's educational development? Okay, video games have been around for 50 years and they've been viewed as only entertainment. However, they're not solely for entertainment and they can be used for many other things. However, people don't really see this aspect of video games. For example, educators oversee the importance of video games and focus on social repercussions. So they basically focus on how society views video games, and they kind of oversee the fact that they could really help with teaching the kids. Okay, and this is from by Kurt Squire from his article Video Games and Education. He's a professor at the University of California and former director of the Games, Learning, and Society Initiative at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And video games contain the power to transform education. This is based on Schaffer and his article Video Games and Future Learning, and he's a part of the Department of Education Psychology, Wisconsin Center for Educational Research. The significance of this question is that there's continuous attempt to incorporate video games into education, and there's dispute as to its significance. So there's people that want to incorporate video games into education, but there's also people that say that it doesn't really help, it's not really any benefit. And the perspectives I chose are scientific, educational, and cultural. Alright, from a scientific perspective, when attempting to facilitate learning using video games, the epistemology or the way of thinking can be acknowledged. Knowledge is a way of thinking, and video games really helps with how, and video games help with, I don't know how to word this. Okay, so video games help portray knowledge, like they help people see things in a deeper way. For example, a full spectrum warrior, as mentioned in Schaffer's article, Video Games and the Future of Learning, it doesn't teach the player to simply blow up everything on a screen, or to think of themselves as a professional soldier. That way they're going to be able to act, like they're going to be able to experience everything. So in that way if they're experiencing everything, they're getting a deeper understanding of what's going on. And that's how it helps them understand what's really going on. This means the player is developing deep thoughts in relation to the video game, therefore making a deeper connection, and that's what's needed for educational material. Creating such epistemic games is very difficult, and that's why people are they're not really stepping forward and acting on it, because it's very hard to get it started. But once it gets started, it's easy for it to keep going on. From a cultural perspective, there's a stereotype that video gamers are very lazy people and that they only seek entertainment. However, there's also an educational side to video gaming, and that's what people don't see. And educators specifically also, they fear using video games in classrooms, because that way they think it's gonna create violent thoughts in the kids are gonna have violent thoughts. Recent developments in video game design are beginning to reverse these trends. Thematically, video games are increasing in complexity, incorporating story, character development, and collaboration into game design. So the studies actually show the reverse is true. So instead of kids getting aggressive thoughts and violent thoughts, they're actually developing character and strong characteristics that are helping them. A survey of 650 MIT freshmen was conducted, and it was found that more than 75% of them were still playing video games at least once a month. This shows that if video games were to be designed in a way that would be attractive to the children, they would use them very often. So if they're going to incorporate video games into education, it has to be in a way that kids are going to want to do it, and they're going to want to learn through using video games. So it just can't be something that's very boring, because that way they're not really going to use it, and there's no use of it. From an educational perspective, if we look at the article, Video Games and Education by Yan Lim, He Lim, and Asmawati Lizim, all from the Facility of Creative Multimedia, it is argued that learning can always be made better with the use of external assistance, which includes people willing to support, and video games provide the support. So basically, video games, it's found that video games have very good way of assessing the students in a way more detailed and professional way than an educator would be able to do it. A Pac-Man study mentioned in Square's article, Video Games and Education. Pac-Man is an action system where skills and challenges are progressively balanced. Goals are clear, feedback is immediate and unambiguous, and relevant stimuli can be differentiated from irrelevant stimuli. So basically, and again, it's a more professional, clear, and set way of teaching kids. In Schaeffer's article, Video Games and the Future of Learning, we are presented with what John Dewey called the fact fetish. This means that everything taught in schools is only a body of facts and information. This means students are not fully grasping the concept. However, video games, basically, they don't provide facts and information, rather they provide experience, and that's what's going to help kids to understand things more and be able to see things in a different way. In conclusion, video games matter to education not only because they don't focus on facts, but also because they allow the participation in valued communities and therefore result in players developing a good way of thinking. And the last thought you can think about is, would you want your children to be presented with the best of opportunities in order to have the best possible future?